possible fight of the night. Coming up this weekend, we have Davey, who could still be in the Navy, Grant, taking on a man with no nickname, representing Metro Boom and Metro Fight Club, Adrian Yanez. You talk about two primary strikers that can definitely get it done. Davey Grant taking on Yanez should be an amazing fight. And I think if this one hits the mat, you got to look out for Davey Grant, because that guy is slick, really, no matter where the fight goes. But if you've paid attention to Davey in his last number of fights, the 3-fight win streak that he had over Grigory Popov, little bit of a layoff, takes on Martin Day, knocks him out where he's an underdog. Then he takes on Jonathan Martinez and ruins Matt Allen's hopes and dreams in that fight. Grant was on a heater of a run. Had a fairly competitive fight his last time out against Marlon Vieira, but in the rematch there, it just wasn't so. And normally the guy that wins the first fight wins the second fight, but not so much in that one. And look at the great things that Vieira's been able to go on and do since then, namely poor old Frankie Edgar. Now, Matt, when we look at this fight, both of these guys are in weird stages of their careers, because for Grant, he had this late career resurgence, but not a lot of miles on the tank. He's, about a month away from being 36 at 135 pounds? Like, that stuff doesn't really compute with a lot of people. Look at bantamweight right now. Yeah, Jose Aldo, again, all-time featherweight. He's the best featherweight of all time. And then there's also Frankie Edgar, but he's lost his last couple. And then who else is there? Dominic Cruz. But there's still...
Pedro Munoz is old.
Those guys are legends, and Pedro Munoz is something. So Davey Grant is just a weird anomaly in this division. And then there's Adrian Yanez. He's like, I don't know, sitting there, you're hanging out with your family, you're wondering, geez, I got a turntable. What record should I put on? What's something that could please everybody? If I showed somebody a fighter, what would please them all? Matt, I have something for you. Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. You put this one on, you're just going to be moving to the music. You're going to be enjoying it. And the best part about an Adrian Yanez fight is typically he wins. His last time out, though, was a little bit less Frank Sinatra. It was more Sinatra Jr. And he almost really had it all undone after a bad first round, where Randy Costa pushed a great pace and had him in a lot of trouble after that first one.
He did, but I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. He never had Yanez in trouble of, being finished. He hurt him with the jab, and he busted up his nose, but he never rocked him, and he never stunned him. It was just a lot of volume on the part of Costa in that matchup. But that's the thing I keep on going back to. Davey Grant hits very, very hard. He's got that old man strength as his, Hall of Fame X Factor. But he's not the fastest striker in the world. And I know Craig rolls his eyes every time I say this, but speed kills on the street and in the cage. And that's the thing I keep on going back to. Davey Grant has really good kicks, and he doesn't get the credit for them, but he really uses his kicks on the outside because he doesn't throw a jab. That's sort of his way of just staying active and staying busy on the outside of his range. He gets the primary of his striking damage done with his hands and with his boxing on the inside. But I keep on going back to the fact that his punches are moving through mud when he throws them. Now, when they land, they have devastating effects on them. Look at what happened to Jonathan Martinez. That left hook was a thing of beauty that flattens him. I just don't think those techniques are going to be open against a guy like Yanez, who's so crisp with his boxing technique. The thing with Martinez is he a great striker? Of course he is. But he implements the kick quite a bit more, and he needs the leg kick and his own body kick to really start getting his own attack off. Where what Grant was able to do in that matchup was get on the inside of his kicking distance and use his own boxing, his own power to really wear on Jonathan Martinez. I don't think that's going to be a good path to victory against a guy like Yanez, because every time you get on the inside, Yanez is the much faster guy, and he's got the better hand power too. So I just don't really know. How is Davey Grant going to win the big moments in this fight? I think he's going to have to rely on his wrestling more than we've seen in the past few fights at least, and it'll be really interesting to see if that works, because the one matchup we've seen him use his wrestling in recent memory was the Marlon Vieira one, his last time out, and he did start to fatigue later on in that fight. So I think for Grant, does he have bad cardio? Not by any means. I don't think he's in that boat. But I think he's kind of like what Justin Gaethje says. Justin Gaethje says, hey, the reason I don't wrestle is because it makes me tired. It's the most draining part of my MMA game. Davey Grant's kind of in that same boat. Can he grapple? Yes. But I worry about him grappling early on in this fight, because let's say he does burn his arms out going for a lot of takedowns early. I don't think he's going to be able to stand up to the power and the punching combinations of Yanez later on if he isn't able to either A, get an offensive takedown, or B, just intelligently defend himself up against the cage.
So if Davey Grant is at 135, what Justin Gaethje is at 155, Justin Gaethje is probably the greatest all-action fighter in combat sports. Yeah. We talked about that on last week's episode of Early Stoppage. You should check it out. It's here on the channel. But is Davey Grant the greatest all-action fighter at 135?
He's on a short list, maybe? No, but here's the thing about Davey Grant. Yes, we say Davey from the Navy. Yes, he's 36 years old at bantamweight, but like, he's got more tread on the tires than you would imagine. I compare him more to like Jimmy Butler than anybody else. Like Butler's a little bit older, he plays really hard, but he's still pretty good for his age, and that's the thing with Grant. You can't just judge him based on his age of being 35 years old. You have to judge him based on how many fights he's had. He's only had 16 professional fights, which makes him sort of young for how old he really is.
So if you look at it in terms of the odds for this one, Yanez open a minus 240 favorite, minus 263 right now. Grant opened a plus 205. He's plus 208 roughly. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, surprise to us, they are to you. Man, I'm going to set the over-under high. I'm going to say over-under 80% Yanez.
I think it's over.
Ah, look at that. 857 total votes, 89% Yanez, 20% by decision, 72% by knockout. For the 11% that have Grant, 43% by decision, 40% by knockout. I would save this one until the first round ends because for Davey Grant, he relies a lot on pressure, unorthodox techniques, and power to really start to pull away and win fights. He talked about it. When the fight's at distance, he's got whipping leg kicks. When it gets in tight, he's got great dirty boxing. He's got a wicked left hook. He has so many different things that he can throw at you. Yanez, nice high stance, walks you down, boxes you up. Sometimes he throws wild head kicks and beats Victor Rodriguez, Sometimes he goes out there against a somewhat green Randy Costa, who he's got a very high ceiling. You lose to Yanez, you don't lose a ton of stock, especially having won that first round handily. But in a fight like this, I want to see it again. Okay, first round against Grant. What's Grant's game plan? Are we going to work the takedowns? Are we going to fight a little bit like Miles Johns when those guys fought? When Johns fought Yanez back in LFA? That's a fight I'd love to see again, but never will. So in this fight, I've got Yanez by an ever so slight margin, but it's not the most confident pick, seeing as how Grant is so well-rounded. I don't think he's going to dip into the wrestling early, but if he does, and if he's able to win the first round, I might consider it a little bit differently.
So the weird thing about Yanez is his career has a lot more similarities to the one of Jorge Masvidal than just his appearance. Like, the way you beat Yanez is he can sort of get... I don't want to say overconfident because I don't think that's the case. But if he gets off to a lead early, he can kind of settle into the fight and let his opponent work his way back in. Domingo Pilarte is not a better fight than Adrian Yanez whatsoever. Like, he's not a better fighter than him. But he has a win over him, and it was just because he was a lot more steady throughout their fight. I think the way to beat Yanez is if you are able to put on that type of a Costa gas tank or Costa output early on in the fight. The problem is Costa proved it. It's really hard to keep that kind of a pace up for a solid 15 minutes if you're outside of the top 15. So until Yanez is fighting like the Marlon Veras of the world, the Sean O'Malley's of the world, I'm going to like him against most other primary strikers in this division, and that's why I like Yanez.
Both of us going with Adrian Yanez, but you make up your mind for yourself on this one. You let us know down below in the comment section who you have, because this is a big time fight of the night style matchup at bantamweight. Absolutely love it. Big time main card left. I mean, look, Joanne Wood, Tyler Santos, who else? Sean Brady, Michael Chiesa. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.